Pardon the mess. I can't even really see the shot as it's going on. I'm having some issues with my web recorder, which has a nicer angles going on with this and easier to manipulate because we're having some issues with that. So we're going with the standard recorder I have here that's been hanging on my computer monitors for a few days, just more or less as another webcam. But we're rolling straight into the camera to see how this thing works out. And we're working it out because I just finished about an hour ago watching the interview with Don Lemon as I'm recording this here, going over my notes, kind of just contemplating what's happening, having lunch so I know I had some time behind it, and going through sort of in timestamps how the interview went. Now, we're not going to do the old Rachel Hollis trick and watch it in real time and garble the sound and do pauses here or there. Just that stuff's just dumb. But we're going to go through the whole thing. So if you get that worried about it, you are more than able to stop watching or pull up the interview, play it until we get to time hacks and kind of see what I'm saying about this as a commentary on underneath. It's an hour of interview, so we're not going to rewatch that hour again. It's just not going to happen. It's not worth the effort. What we are going to do is go to the points in time where we did the interview. Now, let me get this first. Sort of the opening, and the opening to where I got the part where I actually started taking notes. Don Lemon comes in on this edition of the Don Lemon Show. Says welcome. He says he was not canceled by X. X was never meant to be the only platform for the show, which is not the way it was formed out before, not the way it was hyped before. But now the full interview was done, and it is taken care of and paid for by Lemon for his production company. So I'm watching the airing. I'm watching the airing on YouTube. It's on YouTube on this platform. I'm sure it's on other platforms as well, and you can get it as podcasts and other streaming places going forward. But that was the opening for the show. Also, the whole interview is here, although there's edits for just editing purposes. So we all get a chance to see what we can see. As far as we can tell, no piece of context was taken out. In fact, it looks like some extra things were meant there on purpose because parts of the frustration and parts of the kind of smugness on Musk's face was extremely obvious in some cases. So there's that. Watch the interview, see for yourself. I'm watching the interview. I'm watching it. It's a lot of openings that's really sort of painful, but sweet in the same way. The opening getting to know you sections went way too long in the opening questions because we know who he is. And while there was some questions about the partnership with X and things like that, it was more than it should have been. Even for a person like me who really screws up openings, it was really more than it should have been. But somewhere around the 8-minute mark, I decided to open up a notepad and take notes. And the first note came in at the 10-minute mark in the interview. The entire video's about an hour and 6 minutes long or so. What I did notice mostly from the opening parts was that Musk was having some issues, just having conversations. We know that he is autistic, so we know those things as well. And that's something that is really true about folks who are autistic. Their brains are just wired differently. They're mostly geniuses, for the most part. It's all the smarts are all there, but the processing of things somewhere in the long line of just processing bits and bytes, some sort of weird tangent comes in there that they can't ignore, and it throws the whole thing off, and they can't answer simple questions. Although a good mix of this is just personal arrogance, and the personal arrogance will come to play much later in a greater detail. Trust me on that one. But at 10:10, the 10:10 mark, these are more or less parts where I took the notes and saw where things happened. I took my first note for this, and it was that Twitter donations lean left, about 90+%. He may have said 99% in the actual quote in the video. But Elon Musk said that people from Twitter, and it took a while to kind of explain that to what he was saying because it wasn't really stated properly or clearly. People that work at Twitter who made donations tend to make donations to left-leaning organizations, about 90% or so. So the majority of people at Twitter seem to be liberal. This was on a question based on whether Twitter was a right-wing issue, to which Musk said no, it actually was more left-wing, and they were all the censorship was on the right-wing stuff. Basically saying that now that Musk is there, it's evened out because you see more right-wing stuff, even though it's more the deeper stuff, a little bit less left-wing stuff, and they're not running the show, that being the liberals. And of the people that work there, the bulk of them support liberal causes. A lot of it is the West Coast type of thing, he said, is there. For a while, they kind of went more back and forth. At the 15:57 mark, I wrote down, this is boring. Now they're talking about talking cars. They talked in the transition from Twitter being left-wing, right-wing into some SpaceX stuff, some Tesla stuff, things about the Roadster being revamped, and what the next best thing is going to be. And this was a long, rambling discussion that was more long than it needed to be. It was definitely longer than it should have been. And this is what I'll get to later, where he could have being Lemon pushed more questions because he'd had more time and he had less frustrated Elon Musk at that point, instead of talking for this long batch about flying cars or a flying roadster or what would have it, whether it be a roadster with a rocket engine and what you'd be steering with. This was a long discussion. This went on essentially up until 1930, where I took another note. About a minute or so before that, Lemon asked Musk about drug use. Like, when you're having these great ideas, these expansive ideas, are you drunk? Are you high? Are you on something? Musk says he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, and do that stuff. There was that time with Joe Rogan. Yeah, you can tell from the way I couldn't smoke that blunt, I really don't smoke blunts. He brought up ketamine, which Musk said, rightly so, it's kind of personal getting people's prescribed drugs. But Musk went into the ketamine question, and this was the moment that Musk realized that these questions aren't going to be simple, they aren't going to be fluffy, they aren't going to be anything I can answer way quickly. This thing's going to be a full-blown hours-long interview where I'll have to spend some time filling those gaps and not just give short answers and have Don Lemon carry me over his shoulder. Wasn't really a bad part about the ketamine, but the big deal was the fact that he's going back and forth into how's he doing it. He's on a prescription for the thing. He uses it fairly sparingly, not all the time. He may go weeks without using it. He does have depression and depression issues, so that's why he has it. At the 21-23 mark, before they're done with this exchange, I made a note that the problem with Don Lemon's interviews is this. It's not him asking relevant questions, because so far everything is kind of there. It's not him asking probing questions, because the questions that so far have been sort of have not been too terrible. It's the fact that he lingers on the topic way too long, flying cars, for example, and past the interest and the relevance of what's going on. Ketamine, for example. Flying cars were just a boring discussion at some point in time, just throwing out nerd fan boy things. And the ketamine was essentially answered and could have been wrapped up, and Don Lemon could have wrapped it up and went to something more heavy hitting from here, because it was a real perfect transition. That did not happen. So at the 23-17 mark, he's on ketamine, and then all of a sudden he's off. The discussion ends right there. That's basically where they're done. Next transition goes into great replacement theory and illegal immigrants in the same questions. Illegal immigrants voting. This is noted down at 23:43. So 30 seconds later, the question is asked. The two questions asked in one in a very odd way. We'll let him explain, Musk, in a moment about the questions he's asking. But you can watch Musk's sort of gears turn as he realizes he's not entertained anymore. This is not any fun. He's asking questions, not so much that they're hard-hitting and probing. They're questions that he just doesn't want to get into. And so we'll talk about that in a bit. But from there, he answers it. At least the illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants voting question. And it's a fairly good civics lesson. Basically saying for the House of Representatives and your representative body in your local area, it's literally based on the amount of people there. More people in one area gets more representation. It's like that. So if people who are here illegally, people who are here past their visas, people who are here who may be looking for a better life, but did not go through the proper process and are not citizens, they congregate in places like New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Those places have more people there and need more representation, despite the fact that the people that are there are valid or not. And valid is a whole nother buzzword that can get me in trouble in that one. It's just like calling the man who killed the lady in Georgia an illegal, saying that people being valid as long as those same lines. But that's essentially what Musk is saying. Okay? Not a bad lesson. Pretty good, not too controversial, and he can step away from that one without being too much of an arrogant jerk, if you will. But at 26:56, literally right after that, we get back to the great replacement theory part of the question, which is, like I said, a separate question. And Musk answers it to the best of his ability, essentially saying it's not so much about replacing, but the more people there, push people out, blah, blah, blah. Don Lemon asks a question, or goes into a question. In this setup, he says that Musk said he learned his lesson, which Musk asked, I learned my lesson? The actual framing of the question, or the framing of the instance, should have been, you learned a lesson from dealing with some of these talks, and your anti-Semitic talk, in which you then took the trip to the concentration camp with Ben Shapiro. That's where it should which led to and went from there. Because of that weird "did I learn my lesson" question back to him, there was the transition didn't work out so well. Now, in the talk about this section, Musk gets a chance to once again talk about donors, talk about people's support, which he says some Jewish donors really should be more mindful of where they send their money to. Just like saying the Twitter workers who donate are going to leftist stuff, some of the more prominent Jewish donors, he is stating, also have issues with their donations. Their donations going to people that aren't exactly the greatest groups in the world. Not so fair. Didn't go into deep detail on that one, but you can tell where he's going. Because you can always kind of tell where he's going. Now, at the 30-minute mark, 30 minutes, 10 seconds, there was a back and forth about him replying, reposting, retweeting, if we can go call it that, re-Xing things, and him basically signing off that as something he knows, something that is the real world, something that he agrees with. To which he states that anything he quotes doesn't mean he fully believes in it. So something may have a small twinge of something he's into, but they may ramble off in something else. That's the part he doesn't necessarily believe into, but he posted it out there to keep the speech going because something about it rang true to him. Something about it caught his attention and felt like he had to go on. Even if other things involved in it lead down rabbit holes of conspiracy theory and all those other things. At the 30 mark, this is where the real breaking point is. You can see the schism that happens for Elon Musk. He doesn't get completely arrogant yet, but you can see where he's just sort of tired with this sort of stuff. And he basically, Don Lemon said about something about the media and just how you're portrayed and people who won't answer questions, to which Musk says, I don't have to answer to the media. And he said that pretty easy, simply just like that. I don't have to answer to the media. Answers to himself. Fair enough. So this is where, as they continue to go back and forth in the I don't answer to the media, this I'm a man, about 5 minutes into this back and forth, my words, who does Don Lemon think he is? And in about 45 seconds after that, I have more notes. But essentially, the first start was, is he supposed to be Mike Wallace? Is this supposed to be an ambush interview? Is he supposed to be asking these questions that he knows won't be answered in this forum, so people have that sense of doubt in his head that he's trying to hide something? Because he's obviously hiding something. He doesn't want to say exactly what he feels about things because it gets him in trouble and gets him on the record and turns into big old things. To avoid that, you don't answer those questions. But if someone asks you that question, you don't answer it, you're avoiding the question. Big issue on that end. So the Mike Wallace, of course, famous for inventing the walk up to people as getting in their car interview and talk to them as they walk down the streets of their offices, ask them questions they're not going to answer in front of anybody. Is that what's happening? About 2 minutes later, this note from me, I think he thinks, Lemon thinks they are equals in this conversation, which allows him the ability to ask certain things and go back and forth, chat back and forth and see what's going on. This is an interview for infotainment. Some information is going to be brought in there that may be new, may be breaking, may put Lemon on the mark. But he's also doing it thinking that this is going to promote Elon Musk and promote the platform that Musk is using to do these interviews. Because at this point in the middle of the interview, Don Lemon still thinks we're going to put this on X in a few days. So what happens is Elon Musk, as you can tell from your perspective from watching it from that side, maybe Don Lemon didn't see that, or now he's just playing up to the fact that it didn't work out so well. The Elon Musk does not think that the two are compatriots. They're not on an equal standing. And why they're doing this interview, why he's sitting there at this point in time, I don't think he really understands and wants to get away, other than the fact that he said, basically, you get an hour. More on that in a few minutes. Elon Musk is now trolling him after I've gone through this stuff at the 38-minute mark, 38:15. He's now trolling him as they're talking a short back and forth again about what's being put on X, Twitter, what's being out there released, how things are seem like they're more right-wing stuff's out there as opposed to more left-wing stuff in the past, which Musk says. To which Musk says he is about free speech and Don Lemon is about censorship. not letting the people on the right have their say because he doesn't want their say out there because it's censorship. That goes on for another minute or so. We get to DEI somewhere in the middle of this conversation. And so at the 39-minute and 44-second mark, Elon Musk basically says DEI means lower standards. And they're starting off with medical schools and doctors. We'll get to the pilots thing in a moment. And so if there are more doctors who aren't meeting the standards that was higher, there are more bad doctors. The more bad doctors, more people may die because of doctors not as good. Lowering the standard essentially means if you must score a B plus to be a doctor, we're allowing people now to get C pluses because we're short on doctors. Those C plus doctors may not be as good as the other doctors, as opposed to those C plus doctors are good enough, just like the other doctors are good enough. And in most cases, the chance of mortality is not so much based on the grade or based on situation. So we probably won't get more people dying. Now, if they were D minus doctors, there's a different story. But if they're basically the average and our standard is above average, the average shouldn't change the average as much, if you believe so. DEI. And so there happens to be a back and forth, and about a minute later, 40 minutes and 50 seconds in, Musk says about one of the values of the X platform is that there will be plenty of rebuttals to what both Don Lemon said and to what Elon Musk said. And he believes, Elon Musk, that the replies with evidence to what he's saying will be a bit of on the mass end for him coming forward. Basically, all sorts of people will come out with words to support Elon Musk very loudly, if in the Twitter world, in the X world, if you will, going forward. That will happen. I played that note at the 41, 48-minute mark. So, conventional media, again, we'll get to pilots in just a moment, but conventional media at the 42-minute, 45-second mark is where Elon Musk says that they don't apologize for mistakes and they don't post corrections. So if they make a mistake, they don't say it and they never give some sort of very verbal correction going forward. To which Don Lemon says, I personally do. I can only speak for myself, but if something I say goes wrong, I do corrections. I do my apologies. You can take that knowledge any way you want to for either of those guys. At the 45-minute mark, 45:10, they talk about the ski experiment. And we're still semi-talking about DEI and doctors, which is the weird part about it. But this is not the transition so much out of doctors and into pilots as it should be. But it's a transition about doctors and pilots as it was. It just made note that these words came out, so I had to just sort of mark it right there. Black pilots are not as good. That's said at the 46-minute and 12-second mark. Standards should not be lowered for black pilots or female pilots. So this goes on for a while, and we're going to talk about where this went to. But this is a DEI discussion. Same thing about doctors. If you lower the standards for the pilots, that means there's people who are less good as being a pilots, and those people will probably crash more planes. This came about specifically when we had the plane that had the door fly off that was landed by a black pilot, when initially there was all these weirdness about what was happening, and they were trying to blame things on the pilots of the plane when actually it was a mechanical issue that the airline must be fixing right now or they'll lose lots more money. But the pilot was able to put it down safely, and Musk just would not get off this one, saying that less qualified people, women and black people, should be less pilots. Lemon threw out stats that the number of pilots is very low. The number of medical people, doctors, and surgeons low within the black community. However, didn't matter to Elon Musk. People who can't meet the standard should not be working. There you go. Trans rights and the woke mind virus come up at 51:31. And we talk about, it's in the same question again. It really doesn't work the way it does. But essentially, the equation is there's a lot of talk about trans rights, and Musk is really into talking about the woke mind virus, which is something I thought that DeSantis coined. Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, basically coined. But it's been used so often, I don't know who's actually coined it, and Musk uses it a lot as well. With the question coming up about 30 seconds later when they actually focus on that woke mind virus, with Lemon asking Musk, do you actually know what woke means? Essentially talking about how woke's been co-opted from the right, from the left to the right, for conservatives and the more crazier conservatives. I'll say those words out loud. Essentially saying that if you're woke, you're just trying to change everything because it's there and everybody's unfair and everything should be super duper crazy liberal because we all deserve it. As opposed to woke in its original meaning or original context being cases where people dealt with real issues of racism and sexism. Essentially, racism, essentially as a black community word, being woke means knowing that there is a reality beyond what you have right now. It's literally knowing that you don't have to be put down all the time because there's a way to get what you need, get what you want, get more equitable and fair. Not just on trans rights being woke, people thinking trans meds are a woke thing. Literally, people who are being oppressed of rights, knowing that they have their rights and knowing that there are ways to go about fighting to get those rights. That's the way woke was supposed to be meant. Not that way anymore. We're getting low on time, and we're not quite to the point where we're getting low on time, but we'll get there. But we get into a bit of a testy back and forth as we're getting there to get cranky for that time crunch. At the 53:10 mark, there's a back and forth about racism that's going back and forth with the woke mind virus and DEI, all that mixed in. So, well, let me take a step back first. It's 52:39. I missed that mark. Lemon asks, is everything blamed on race these days in America? And Musk says yes. That continues on for another minute in conversation where Musk says that every country has some racism in it. Every place has some sense of this group doesn't like this group of others for some reason, which carries on into the fact that we are all descendants of slaves. Those are the words he used. Not we've all been oppressed people. We all come from other places. We're all descendants of slaves. Everybody at every certain time has been a slave to something or somebody. Your mileage may vary on that one. So we should treat each other based on the individual aspects these days because we know better. Not by the fact that someone's ancestors were slaves to these people at various periods of time. A moment later, 56 minutes and 48 seconds, Elon Musk tells Don Lemon that he keeps putting words into his mouth, which Lemon says, I didn't say you said all those things. Back to the everything I quote is not necessarily what I feel. Everything I quote is not necessarily exactly how I feel. Don Lemon is sort of trying to back him up by saying what he said. These are things that have been attributed to you because you're attached to the tweet, to the word, to the quote. I'm not saying you said these things, but it seems like you're saying a lot of things that other people are saying. That's where the putting words in your mouth part comes to. Don Lemon talks about disadvantage, still in the racism talk, and Don Lemon says that he understands, because he's lived through it, disadvantages based off of racism as it is. He also brings up slightly things on his homosexuality, on that part, but it's really focused on the racism thing in the conversation. To which Musk says, you are very successful. To which Don Lemon agrees, but he also says that is in spite of living through disadvantages because of racism, and because he's lived through them, he knows what he knows about it and what he's lived through. He cannot speak up specifically for women, specifically for Hispanics, Asians, any other nationality or any other race going forward. He can speak speak to people who are basically pushed back for being homosexual, because he knows that, being a gay man, but he can't speak as a blanket industry to all these other folks except for black people, because the black thing is the thing that he's a constant of. At the 58-minute and 20-second mark, there's a long pause in a question that's still dealing with wokeness. The pause seemed like it was forever. He'll break out of it 20 seconds after I put this note down, but the pause seemed like it was forever, where it seemed like Musk's brain was broken on this woke mind virus question, or follow-up question, I should say, specifically. It turned into a statement where Musk said, the woke mind virus is fundamentally racist, sexist, and evil. It's bad. So people who are on their high horse about changing things because it's the right thing to do, suffering from the woke mind virus, essentially saying people that think anyone can use whatever bathroom they want to, and all kids should change their genders to feel like it, which is essentially what we're going towards. Not so much him hippy dippy silly stuff, but the fact that people should change their genders and get all this stuff, and you should let children do it as well because they know better. That's where it's going to. That's where he's at. Racist because racism, sexist because sexism, and just bad evil. Oh, this is also part where he says we're running out of time. And the first part time he said run out of time. It's not as awkward as we're led to believe in the clips we saw that were clips that are going to come in the next couple minutes. Because being Elon Musk and being kind of busy and being autistic and being able to kind of deal with time, and it wasn't said beginning that he had an hour to do it or 60 seconds to do it or this window to do it, but essentially you're coming up on an hour's worth of interview time. Based on the opening for the actual show, I wrote this mark down at 58:50, so 59 minutes. It's probably 56 minutes or so. There's about 4 minutes to an hour, and Musk is kind of seeing this, drinking the water, getting all sort of. So at this point, it's like, hey, we're running out of time. My batteries are running low right now. So we continue for another 5-6 minutes. Free speech and advertising, which if Don Lemon didn't take so much time earlier with other questions, very long, drawn out discussions on ketamine, which went longer than it should have, and the flying car, which probably shouldn't have gotten that far. We'd have more time. It'd be more like 5 or 52, 53, and Musk wouldn't be so panicky on time and maybe so cranky because of time. Who knows? So this goes on for a couple minutes, and at the 1 hour 1 minute mark, Musk says, "Please choose your next question wisely because we have about 5 minutes left." This is basically what we've seen in the clips where he's getting testy, and he's talking about the stuff. The odd thing is he's getting testy about Twitter advertising and not so much the DEI stuff, which is weird. But this is where he's testy, probably because it's after an hour. An hour's passed in this interview. So Musk's take on his advertising stance, essentially advertisers leaving, is that he is about free speech. We'll lose money over it. If advertisers don't want to spend money on his platform, that's fine. He'll figure it out. If advertisers want to dictate what sort of content they're placed next to, that's okay. We'll work on that. But if the blanket statement is none of it, no problem. Free speech. Twitter's about free speech, and the advertisers can go stick it, essentially. So, we're going way past time when we should be doing this stuff, and Don Lemon has got many note cards he's flipping through, so he's not got to the big questions yet. Mostly because he asked bad questions or not so great questions and long follow-ups on things that weren't necessary. My editorializing, your mileage may vary, and Elon Musk had issues answering some of those questions in real time. No problem, he wasn't briefed on them, obviously, so that's just how it is. But time management on Don Lemon's side did not work to his advantage in this one. Or maybe he thought he'd have more time. Maybe he thought he wouldn't be wrapped up. Since other people do 3-hour podcasts, why wouldn't Don Lemon get 3 hours? Maybe that wasn't quite stated at the beginning. But essentially, Don Lemon at this point, 1 minute, 1 hour, 2 minutes, 20 seconds. One of those, I'm not trying to upset you. One of the things we saw a lot in the clips online. Musk is like, you're upsetting me because that last question was not cogent. This was about advertising and free speech. Essentially, the question he asked wasn't properly phrased, didn't make any sense to him. He couldn't really answer it in a logical way or a way he can get out of it. And Musk is just sort of flipping out on it. That's what's happening in real time. So, with that. Yeah. So at 1 hour, 3 minutes, Lemon asked, how did you get this way? How did you get to be Elon Musk? Well, he's basically said, I was born this way. This is how I am. It's just how I was meant to be. Plus, had a tough childhood. There's your nature and nurture part of it. Good question. No real time to follow up, so when a follow-up was given, he was told to read Walter Isaac's book because we're running out of time. Again. So at the 4 minute mark past the hour, Lemon once again says, not trying to upset you. Musk once again says, I got other people waiting on me, so I really got to go. So, born this way. Going deeper to try to get some background. Born this way because of your father. Yes, I had a difficult childhood with my father. Read the book. How's family life? Is it difficult now? Musk says family life as it is now is okay. Musk, at the moment, I don't believe is married. Though he has 2 children with Grimes. He has a bunch of children with his previous wife. He had a child with a secretary, someone who worked for him. It's Musk has a lot of kids. So one thing he's got, he's a player by all means. But family life, whatever that means for Elon Musk, he says is fine. Final question is on legacy. Well, next final question, because it'll sneak in another one. But final question is on legacy. And Lemon asks, what do you think about your legacy? How will you be remembered? And Musk gives a statement, not a direct quote, but essentially the essence of this is that if I died knowing I did what I was doing for the right reasons, what I did was right, I won't care what people say about it. Now, I always say this when I talk about, I talk to my wife about my funeral. I don't really care what's happening because I'm dead. I'm the least important person in this thing because at this point, I don't have a say in the matter. And that's sort of how it is. Although I want people to remember me in a great way. If the casket has some scratches on it, that's the least of my concerns because I shall be dead and won't really worry about that point. Elon Musk is saying as far as his legacy goes, he thinks he's doing all the right things, or we'll get to that in a moment. He thinks he's doing the right things for the right reasons and trying to make the world a better place. And if he believes that, what other people believe and what they say about him going forward doesn't really matter. Although, like I said, if you're dead, a lot of things won't really matter at that point in time. So, what is Musk actually doing? Wrapping it up, literally saying these words before he shakes hands and walks away, is that he's battling basically the existential risks of the world and extending consciousness around the world, making people wiser, smarter, better, and fighting off the things that may actually kill us. AI not dropped into this thing here, but essentially the things that we are doing to ourselves that are bringing us down. When, in some cases, the things that seem to be bringing us down aren't things that, if we reverse them, would bring them back up. It would open up for other things to bring us down, or to bring us back to a level where control was basically in the hands of a smaller cabal of people as opposed to more freedoms. It all comes down to where freedoms go. Final question. The actual shake your hand question. It's on the second page, so I didn't see it there until I rolled down when I blew the thing up. Lemon asked, would you change anything? Based on that last question, I seem like I'm doing things right, so as long as I'm doing things right, I feel good about it. Lemon asked, would he actually go back and change something? Musk says, I've made some mistakes. He didn't list any because there's out of time, of course. He says, I've made some mistakes in my life, and if I had a time machine, I would go back and fix them, but I do not have a time machine, which is, I guess, the real point of that answer. I can't fix them. I'm not worried about it. I'm moving forward. I'm going ahead. I think what I'm doing is right, and no one can tell me otherwise. This is how it's going to go. At this point, they shake hands, and Musk walks away. Don Lemon pops back in for maybe 20 seconds to say, well, you've seen it. What are your comments? What do you think? We have more people coming up, so give me the comments on this platform. Let me know. And then the standard YouTube thing. Press this button to subscribe. Press this button to watch more content, because once you get more content in there, that video will pop out. Right now, the only video of long-form version is the Elon Musk interview. We don't know who else he's interviewed going forward, whatever's in the can. We just know that he had this one going, and because of the canceling, although Don says it wasn't canceled, it turned into a thing to go forward. Essential was made pretty public with the your canceled post by Elon Musk. So it turned into a public display, and then Don Lemon made a big deal about it because of the clicks. Why am I doing this thing here? Because of the clicks. We'll see how this actually works out going forward. If you like me doing things like this, breaking things down, because it takes way too much time, way too many things to make it work in. It just so happens that I've got a little time in this period where I can kind of flow these things. Unfortunately, equipment's not acting right, so I've got to work on that going forward as well. Let me know if this is a wash, because nobody watches it. Everybody clicks after 2 minutes. Let me know. Give me some comments and feedback what you think about this going forward, so I know what to do with these things. Get more great long-form conversational things in here. What I'm looking to do, be honest, is to bring in more people to talk to. So I have a lot of friends in the blogosphere, the video sphere, the podcastosphere, that back in the day when this was kind of a bigger thing was not like hot and heavy, and then of course things waned down, and now it's turned into folks with a lot of staff, a lot of money, and the iHeartRadio backing can do these things. This is a side gig, a labor of love, as I say often, and the labor takes effort. So we're doing what we can to make the effort works out. We give you conversational news stories every day. We give you hot takes as we can, and when equipment is well, we do things to liven things up, if you will. So go to our website, thisistheconversationproject.com, and consider checking out some of our sponsors. Consider being a partner and help us going on. Make sure you're following us in the feeds on Facebook and Twitter. X. Facebook.com/thisistheconversationproject and Twitter.com, X.com/T_conversation, because every 50 minutes we're posting new stories for you to engage in, which gives us our script every single weekday morning for things you might have heard. Other things abound, so stop by the website, thisistheconversationproject.com, to see what we have going forward, and just let me know what we can do. Email me, theconversationinbox@gmail.com. I'm getting better at these things. I've come a long way since the 8th grade. Trust me, we're getting better, and you guys are helping me out very much. So thank you for all the love, some of the hate, and all constructive criticism going on the way. I've got to do some editing on this one. Unfortunately, I'm not going to do as much editing as I should. I got to do some editing at this one, so let's get this one in the can, get it done. We'll see if this works out for you guys. You let me know if you want more of this stuff, and if my camera angles are any good.